The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, here's a look at the lead stories. A fire early this morning destroyed Leparkan's bond in Georgetown. A former Speaker of the National Assembly is calling on the People's National Congress reform to end its squabbling. Guyanese business icon and philanthropist Yesu Prasad has died. And in regional news, police in Trinidad yesterday fired tear gas on several anti-vaccine protesters. And for the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details will be coming up in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, which results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. An early morning fire destroyed the Leparkan bond on Lombard and Broad Streets, Georgetown. Millions of dollars in imported goods, as well as the facility itself, went up in flames. The fire began shortly after midnight. The cause of the blaze at the decades-old metal facility was not immediately known. Many vehicles were destroyed, and the contents of a number of shipping containers were also burnt. Former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ralph Ramkaran, has urged the main opposition People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, to end its internal squabbling and allow its leader to emerge as opposition leader. He says that David Granger, Joseph Harmon, and their team lost and they should now give up gracefully. Mr. Ramkaran says there is nothing in the Constitution of Guyana that provides that Mr. Harmon is entitled to a 5-year term. According to the House Speaker, the fact that the Constitution provides for a procedure for removal of the leader of the opposition by a vote of no confidence rejects such a notion. On the issue of the post of representative of the list, Mr. Ramkaran says that person is merely the point of contact between the chief election officer and a contesting political party. He explains that part of the function of that person is the transmission of the names of persons selected as parliamentarians to the chief election officer. Mr. Ramkaran says that Mr. Norton and his teams recently secured overwhelming victory at the PNCR's internal elections, gives him a rightful claim to parliamentary seats for him and his team and leader of the opposition. The PNCR has been cautioned by Mr. Ramkaran that unless the divisions in that party are resolved, the PNCR will not be able to equip and elevate itself to deal with several matters concerning the oil sector and Guyana's development. The Health Ministry says that 9 more persons have died from COVID-19, bringing the national death toll to 1,095. 4 of them lived in Region 3, West Demerara Essequibo Islands, 4 others from Region 4, Demerara Mahaika, and the other one is from Region 6, East Berbice Quarantine. The youngest was a 3-month-old girl, and the oldest was a 72-year-old woman. Official figures show that there are 1,082 new cases within the past 24 hours. 12 of the 164 hospitalized persons are in the intensive care unit, and 10,399 others have been told to isolate themselves at home. 5 others have been ordered to also isolate themselves at home. Police say they are looking for the person who dumped a bag full of garbage on Drury Lane, Camberville, hours after it was cleaned. Investigators say their probe includes reviewing surveillance video recordings to find out who was responsible for dumping waste there. The Guyana Police Force also says that they are also keeping an eye out for litterbugs and that they will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. City Mayor Ubraj Narain has said that it is not profitable to deploy the Georgetown City Constabulary to catch people who are littering and charge them under the Environmental Protection Act. Instead, he has asked local government minister Nigel Dharmlal to approve city bylaws to counter littering and bring in much-needed revenue for the city administration. Mr. Dharmlal has refused to say whether he will okay the littering bylaws. Well-respected and renowned Guyanese business and cultural icon Yesu Prasad died early Monday morning, hours after he was discharged from hospital. He was 93 years old. President Irfan Ali says Guyana has lost an outstanding soul in Dr. Yesu Prasad, a true son of the soil. The Guyanese leader said he joined with Mr. Prasad's family, friends, management and staff of Demerara Distillers Limited, Demerara Bank and the wider private sector in mourning his passing. Executive Chairman of DDL, Kamal Samaru, who was mentored by Mr. Prasad about 45 years ago, stated that he made an outstanding contribution and has left a huge legacy. And over now to regional news. Several protesters were detained by police and dozens more were tear-gassed at the Queen's Park Savannah on Sunday. The pushback protest, led by social activist Umar Abdullah of the First Wave movement, began on Sunday morning with hundreds gathered to march around the Savannah in solidarity against the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, including the Prime Minister's vaccination policy for government workers. Police asked Abdullah and his protesters to leave as they did not have a permit from the Acting Commissioner of Police to protest. However, the crowd persisted and the march went on. At around 2 p.m., after several attempts to disperse the large crowd, the riot police were called in and officers began detaining protesters while other officers fired tear gas. One man who was parked in the Savannah and seen drinking a beer from the tray of his pickup truck was detained after officers asked him several times to leave. The agitated crowd chanted, "Rowley must go," as police enclosed them, forcing them out of the Savannah. Russian officials have refused to rule out military deployments to Cuba and Venezuela if tensions with the West over Ukraine continue to escalate. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said on Thursday he could neither confirm nor rule out the possibility of Russia sending military assets to Latin America if the United States and its allies do not curtail their military activities on Russia's doorstep. He cited Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning that Moscow could take unspecified military technical measures if the Western powers do not comply with his demands. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan dismissed statements about a possible Russian deployment to Cuba and Venezuela as what he termed gadgets in public comment. Shortly after his first election in 2000, Putin closed a Soviet-built military surveillance facility in Cuba as he sought to improve ties with Washington. But Moscow has intensified contacts with Cuba in recent years, and in December 2018, Russia briefly sent some of its nuclear-capable Tu-160 bombers to Venezuela in support of President Nicolas Maduro. Talks between the U.S. and Russia in Geneva on Monday and a related NATO-Russia meeting in Brussels on Wednesday took place in response to a significant Russian troop built up near Ukraine, which the West fears could be a push for an invasion. Russia, which annexed the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea in 2014, has denied having plans for another incursion into its neighboring country. Jamaican authorities have arrested a former Haitian senator who is a prime suspect in the July assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. Jamaica Constabulary Force spokesman Dennis Brooks told Reuters news agency that John Joel Joseph, a well-known Haitian politician named by authorities as a suspect in Moïse's murder, was arrested by authorities on Friday. Brooks declined to say whether the arrest followed a request from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is also investigating the murder. It was also unclear where Joseph was arrested in Jamaica. Meanwhile, Jamaica Police Superintendent Stephanie Lindsay told the Associated Press that several other people had also been arrested along with Joseph, and authorities were trying to determine if they were relatives. Lindsay said they were arrested before dawn on Saturday and did not share any other details. Among those who welcomed the arrest was Claude Joseph, Haiti's former foreign minister, who served as interim prime minister shortly after Moïse's assassination. Joseph is the second suspect to be arrested in Jamaica. In late October, Jamaican authorities arrested former Colombian soldier Mario Antonio Palacios. He was recently extradited to the United States and faces a new trial after being charged with conspiracy to commit murder or kidnapping outside the U.S. and for providing material aid resulting in death, knowing or intending to use such material aid in preparation for or carrying out the conspiracy to kill or kidnap. Assassins armed with rifles stormed and killed Moïse's private home in the hills above Port-au-Prince on July 7th, sparking a massive manhunt and investigations in several countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. More than 40 people, including 18 former Colombian soldiers, have been arrested in connection with the attack, in which Moïse's wife was injured. A new study on vaccine hesitancy in 6 Caribbean community countries has found that those out of formal work and those who are educated to the secondary level fit the typical profile of the person refusing the vaccine to combat the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. The study, commissioned by the United Nations Children's Emergency Fund, UNICEF, and funded by the United States Agency for International Development, examines the extent of and reasons for vaccine hesitancy and whether the minds of vaccine-hesitant persons can be changed. The study, conducted by the Barbados-based Caribbean Development Research Services Incorporation, was conducted in Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago. These countries have indicated that between 40 to 46% of their population have been vaccinated. More than 5,000 people were surveyed, and according to the study, 24% of the unvaccinated respondents believe that the vaccines were developed too quickly and are uncertain about what is in them. 1 in 5 said that taking the vaccine is a choice and they simply chose not to do so. However, there is room for optimism. The study provides insight into what might change minds. Many, as high as 51%, cite the need for more medical and scientific information. Over 40% want to know more about side effects and efficacy, while 30% want information on the impact of the vaccine on sexual health and their ability to have children. In addition, 39% said they might rethink their position if they required the COVID-19 vaccination to travel overseas, while 34% may reconsider if it was necessary to get or to keep a job. The study also highlighted respondents' thoughts on vaccinating their children, whereas 62% across the 6 countries said they were vaccinated themselves. Most were against vaccinating their children, with only 24% at preschool, 31% at primary level, and 48% at secondary level. And now for the international news, the latest bulletin coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News, I'm John Shea. International efforts to deliver aid to tsunami-hit islands in Tonga have been gathering pace as further information comes in from damage assessment teams sent by the Australian and New Zealand military. No mass casualties have been reported as a result of Saturday's huge volcanic eruption. There's been significant damage to several islands in Tonga. The capital, Nuku'alofa, has been blanketed with ash. The disaster coordinator with the Red Cross in neighbouring Fiji, Matiu Nokalevu, said the damage was still difficult to access as communication cables were down.
The devastation here in Fiji and in Tonga is unpredictable at the moment. Right now, within Fiji, there are smaller islands that are being devastated by the inundation of waters, and there are reports of homes being swept through the strong currents. However, for Tonga itself, we are still trying to establish communication. There's a ship going across to fix the cable, and then we can only plan from there on.
The former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, has returned to Kiev despite the risk of arrest. He left for Poland last month when he was placed under investigation for high treason, an allegation he denies. Danny Eberhard reports.
There were chaotic scenes at the airport in Kiev as Petro Poroshenko was delayed briefly at passport control before emerging to address thousands of flag-waving supporters. He appealed for unity to show Russia that Ukraine was strong. It comes at a time when Russian forces have massed in annexed Crimea and close to Ukraine's borders. Mr. Poroshenko denies allegations that he collaborated with what investigators call terrorists in the purchase of coal from territory controlled by Russian-backed separatist rebels during his time in power.
Beijing's Centre for Disease Control is recommending that people stop ordering items to be delivered from overseas after concluding that a local woman was infected with the Omicron variant after opening a package. Our correspondent Stephen McDonnell has more details.
A woman in Beijing tested positive to the Omicron variant, despite not having left the city in recent times. She is so far the only one here to have been recorded with the highly contagious variant of COVID-19. At a press conference today, Beijing's Centre for Disease Control said the possibility that she was infected by a parcel from another country could not be ruled out. They said traces of the virus had been found on packages arriving from other countries, including one that she received, and urged people to stop making international purchases.
Health officials in India say the number of daily COVID infections has fallen in the cities of Delhi and Mumbai in the past few days. They said most of those who contracted the disease had recovered at home. This is the latest world news from the BBC. The United Nations Human Rights Commission says Taliban leaders in Afghanistan are institutionalizing gender-based discrimination and violence against women and girls. The UN said Taliban policies constituted a collective punishment of women and girls. It said a strategy to exclude women and girls from work and education was pushing them into poverty. On Sunday, a group of women held a protest in Kabul demanding rights to work and education. One of the protesters said the Taliban used pepper spray to disperse them. Iran says 3 of its diplomats have arrived in Saudi Arabia to take up their posts at the headquarters of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Jeddah. The regional rivals have been hostile towards each other, with Saudi Arabia cutting diplomatic ties in 2016. But last year they started to hold direct talks in an effort to ease tensions. The arrival of Iranian diplomats in Jeddah appears to be another part of this process. The chairman of the global banking giant Credit Suisse, Antonio Horta Osorio, has resigned with immediate effect after having broken COVID quarantine rules. Darshini David reports.
Internal investigations are reported to have found that he breached COVID quarantine rules more than once, including on a trip to watch the tennis at Wimbledon last summer from Switzerland, which was then on the amber travel list. That should have required him to self-isolate for 10 days. In a statement, he said, "I regret that a number of my personal actions have led to difficulties for the bank and compromised my ability to represent the bank."
Australia's Prime Minister has raised the prospect that the Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic may be able to return to the country sooner than anticipated, following his deportation ahead of the Australian Open tournament. Under Australia's immigration laws, Djokovic can't be granted another visa for 3 years. But Scott Morrison said he could be allowed entry sooner under the right circumstances. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. A fire early this morning destroyed Leparkin's Bond in Georgetown. A former Speaker of the National Assembly is calling on the People's National Congress reform to end its squabbling. Guyanese business icon and philanthropist Yesu Prasad has died. And in regional news, police in Trinidad yesterday fired tear gas on several anti-vaccine protesters. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the Newstalk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.